There are handouts in the back. If you haven't got one, you should head back and grab that. There's information from last meeting and also information that Lisa's going to cover here in a moment from this meeting. We have two parts to our meeting, the first of which is the presentation on finance by Lisa Voisin from Baird Financial. And then the second part of the meeting is going to be a presentation about the survey, which is in draft version number 8 as of today, with more versions to follow, and we're going to settle on that and be done with that hopefully in the next week to 10 days. You will have an opportunity to chime in as well and ask questions, so be prepared with those. Whenever you have them, you certainly can chime in with them. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Voisin, and I was told to stand right here, so you're on camera, so don't break the rules. So you got to be right here.
Will do. Thank you, Shawn. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Voisin. I'm from Robert W. Baird. We're a financial firm located and headquartered in Milwaukee. We work with about 80% of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin on finance issues, budgeting and forecasting, and what I'm going to be talking about tonight, which is essentially issuing debt. I've been with Baird for 33 years. I started when I was 10. Because that's such a long time. Who stays at the same company for 33 years? Me. And I also served on a school board, so I kind of got the school board perspective in Muskego, which is a suburban Milwaukee school district, for a while. So I have a little bit of that background as well. What I'd like to do tonight is really just hit the highlights. What's important for you to understand. I'm not going to dive deep into the weeds of municipal bonds. I'm not going to dive deep into the weeds of school budgeting, but more about taxes and what this might mean for you, and really how fiscally stable. I hope you walk away and really understand how stable this district is in terms of finances. It's a super great administration that has run this district very well, and board as well. Good job. And hopefully you'll walk away with a real good understanding of what we've done so far and where we're going to go in the future. And I actually worked with the district. I've been working with this district for years, so you may recognize my face. I've been at many board meetings over the years. So I always like to start out with one of the questions that everyone always asks is, why can't you just pay for your maintenance on an annual basis? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about funding options for facilities before we dive into the tax impacts and those kinds of things. But it's really important, I think, to understand that schools are limited on the amount of revenue that they can bring into the district. They're limited. So in Muskego, we had a budget for, I think it was like $330,000. I don't know why I remember that number, but we had a budget for facilities on an annual basis that helped replace carpetings and windows and the small boiler, maybe a new roof or roof sections. That's all we could afford. And once the limits started getting tighter and we didn't have the revenue, we would cut that budget. And you'll see that across the state, that maintenance budgets are the first things to get cut. So it gets challenging to keep up with all your maintenance needs just with your annual budget. Now, if you're a district that has a new elementary school that you want to build, that's different, right? You're not going to pay for that out of your budget. So some of the options to pay for your facility projects, as I just said, your annual budget. The state DPI also gives you certain funds, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but there are certain, well, I'm going to say trust fund for facility projects that you can funnel on an annual basis if you have a surplus at the year end. You can funnel money into those different funds, but again, not significant. You'll see across the state that it's not a significant amount of dollars in Fund 46, for example. So that's why we turn to borrowing. And when a school borrows, you can borrow and pay out of your annual budget, right? But when we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, it really comes down to a referendum borrowing. So it really comes down to asking voters, can we borrow money to fund all of these, in your case, maintenance projects? So that's what we're looking at the very bottom. It's what we call our Fund 39. So I always try to start out with this slide as well, because this talks about tax levy. And a school's tax levy is really broken out into 3 components. The borrowed funds, the voter-approved debt. So we're going to levy a tax for principal and interest payments on a loan, which you have 0. You're one of the minority in the state. There's only 11% of the K-12 school districts in the state of Wisconsin have no debt. And usually those are the districts that have facility needs. The ones that have debt typically are able to maintain or are maintaining and upgrading their facilities as they go. So it's really, really good, and I'm super impressed that you've been able to pay off all of your debt, but it's also a challenge because now you've got facility needs and you need to go back to the voters and say, and that's what we're talking about tonight. One other thing I want to point out on that tax levy is it's separate. It's a separate levy. It really has nothing to do with the left-hand side, which is your revenue limit levy. There's a red box around it. That's because the state limits you. You're limited as a district on how much you can levy a tax for. It's based on enrollment and a very complicated formula that I'm not going to talk about. But back in 2010, we all had a lot of districts, if you remember Act 10, when that came into play, they were confusing those two tax levies. And they were saying, well, you know, Act 10 is giving you some flexibility. Why can't you, pay for debt out of that or whatever? So what I'm saying is they're completely separate. And then you do have a small, what we call community service levy. So that might be for the auditorium or a pool, something that's being used by the community. So again, 3 sections of your tax levy. That revenue limit levy on the left, the only way it can be increased, other than maybe increasing enrollment, is by going to voters and saying, putting a ballot question that says, can we increase our operational levy or our revenue limit levy? You guys did that in 2017. We'll talk about that in just a minute. You went to you voted yes for an increase in that side of the tax levy, and that's included in that number. So, actually, I think the next slide talks a little bit about that. So, you were asked in 2017, can we increase the revenue limit side of the tax levy, which is what the visual you just saw, by $1.9 million annually on a recurring basis. And the district has used those $700,000 for maintenance budget and $1.2 million for operations and some of the projects, and many of you know this already, but some of the projects that were completed, air handling, parking lots, roofs, some of the small maintenance projects have been able to be upgraded. But again, the list is a lot longer than that, and that's why we're here today. So going back to that tax levy, the school levies a tax to all of the voters, all of the community, for $8.3 million. It really doesn't mean much, but what you guys really want to know is, what does that mean to me, like my tax bill? So I'm going to give you the simple math. You just take the $8.3 million, which is the total levy, and you divide it by all of the property value in the school district. And you come up with a mill rate, and you're going to hear me say mill rate lots tonight, but you come up with a mill rate. In your case, the $8.3 million is divided by all of the property value, which is $1,073 million, and you come up with this mill rate with $7.74. Super important to understand mill rate, because there's 2 reasons why we calculate mill rate, or I guess I look at, there's 2 reasons I use it for. One is to be able to calculate taxes on your property. So the simple math, move the decimal over 2. So $7.74 is $774 on a $100,000 home. So if you see a mill rate, move the decimal over 2, and that's the tax, the annual tax you'll see on your tax bill, estimated, because there's more to it than that. But the simple math is this. Move the decimal over 2. If you have a $100,000 property, your school tax is going to be just about $774. And that's the math for mill rate. So the 2 reasons why we use it: 1, for this reason, to calculate taxes or estimated taxes on your property, obviously double it if you have a $200,000 home. But the second reason is really compare yourself to your neighbors. How are you doing? How are you doing compared to the area school district? Somebody that lives in Clear Lake School District with a $100,000 property, what are they paying for taxes? And you can do that if you look at their mill rate, which is right here. Oh shoot, Clear Lake, I drove through there. I was thinking they were your neighbor, but here we've got Prescott, St. Croix Central, Baldwin, New Richmond, Ellsworth, Somerset, Osceola, and guess what? Amory's on the bottom. That is something to be very proud of. You have the lowest tax rate in the area. So someone who owns a $100,000 property pays about $774. We just talked about that. But someone who lives in Prescott with a $100,000 property pays $1,072 on their taxes. So this is a great visual. I think it's something to be very proud of as a school district. And as you got a sneak preview before, this is historical. Let's look back to 2013-14. And you can see how much that mill rate has dropped, even with the additional 1.9 million taxes that you went to referendum for. And we planned for that 1.9 million. We knew that in 17, 18, there was going to be a drop, and we filled it in with that 1.9 million. So again, you've seen this trend over time of that mill rate or the school taxes dropping. So in 13-14, if you had a $100,000 property, you paid $1,094, and now you're at $774. We're projecting for next year to be about the same, $786. So this fall, when you get your tax bill, it should be about the same as last year. That's what we're projecting right now. That gray line is state average. So the state K-12 average for mill rate, you are now well below that average. So again, another thing to be very proud of. Now we dive a little bit deeper into some more detail about that mill rate. So again, this is that same mill rate chart looking back in history, but now I'm breaking it up into those pieces that we talked about. The debt piece, the revenue limit piece, and in your case, we had a couple other components. So we did a little bit of debt prepayment along the way, so we were able to pay your debt off early. So the last debt that you had, I don't have the details on that. I should have that. But we were able to pay your debt off early, and now you don't have any debt. All you have now is the operating or the revenue limit tax levy along with that community service, which isn't indicated there because it's such a small piece. But the idea is that early on you had the gray bar, which is that debt, the referendum debt payments. Then we brought on the $1.9 million, which is the tan color. So again, just breaking out the mill rate over time to see how we have planned. The board has done a great job to help mitigate any peaks and valleys in your mill rate, and we're going to try to do that again with this possible new referendum. So what I did was I just took a couple of different borrowing amounts. Nothing is set in stone yet as far as what the dollar amount would be for borrowing for a project. That's why we're going to be going over the survey. That's why the survey is coming out. So I just took some ranges. So I went from 20 million to 80 million, and hypothetically, I had a financing plan put together. You can borrow and amortize debt over 20 years. State statutes say you can't go any longer than that. And the interest rates right now I'm using is 3.25 to 3.50. If you borrowed today, you'd probably be about 2%. So very, very conservative. I'm always that way. John will attest to this, that I'm very conservative and I always can end up better than this. But I don't know what the future holds. And if you were successful, it would be next year, maybe 6-8 months from now. So I have to be conservative as I put my projections out there. But I think out of 222 facility referendums, I think there was only one time where I came in above what I had projected, and it was in 2008 when the market crashed. So if we have a serious world event and interest rates go to 5%, these numbers aren't going to jive. If we continue to stay at 2%, you're going to come in well below this. And as we move along, I will fine-tune these numbers. I'm also including the impact of your state aid, which is minimal. I'm assuming 3% growth in your tax base on an annual basis. State average this year was 7. So again, taking that conservative approach, what do we have estimate for this year? 9. So super conservative on the growth in the tax base. Again, I don't know if this year is an anomaly because of what's happening with COVID and all of that. So the takeaway from this is the numbers you see here, very conservative. So again, 20 million would be an increase of $85 on the mill, or 85 cents on the mill rate. So again, moving that decimal over 2, it's $85 on a $100,000 home that you would see for the year for your taxes. And per month, it's $7.08 on a monthly mortgage payment. All the way up to 80 million, the mill rate impact would be $3.42, or $342 on a $100,000 home. Now, to put that into perspective, the highest mill rate in the 222 referendums I've worked on, I think it was a 375 actually, was an increase for Dodgeville. A new high school failed. The next highest, or the highest that I've ever have passed in the state of Wisconsin is $2.22 impact. The lowest is no impact because debt was going to 0 and they were adding on new debt. So the range for me personally is 0 to $2.22. So I wanted to just put that in perspective for you as far as like what I've seen across the state. So I look at this list and I think, wow, you know, anything is pretty manageable as you get it into the 20, 30, 40 million. And I'm going to show you how that falls into place in a minute. Here's my interest rate chart. This goes back to like when I started at Baird. And well, actually now it's after. I started in 1988. Schools were borrowing at 7 and 8%. I mean, interest rates were at 7 and 8% when I started at Baird. And this year, I had several April referendums lock in under 2% for a 20-year loan. So opportunity is now, as it relates to interest rates, they are at all-time historical lows. I don't know if they're going to stay. I keep being told they're going up, but they keep staying steady. We had well, you could look at the one-year snapshot in the upper right-hand corner. It looks like there's a lot of volatility there, but you know, from the beginning from last September to this September, we've pretty much gone nowhere. So for what it's worth, interest rates are very low, and you have a pretty strong bond rating from, I think it's Moody's, and that'll keep your rates low. So you're in good fiscal position to do that. I'm going to pause here and see, is there any questions on what I've been talking about in terms of mill rate, tax impact, anything like that I've been talking about, or some of my assumptions?
On the assumptions, asking about the decrease in operating expenses, that seems to be, and reduction of debt seems to be how the mill rate has come down.
Yep.
What caused that decrease in operations, or is it an increase in property values?
So she's asking why there was a decrease right here. That black bar is your operating mill rate. So it's the mill rate for the revenue limit. A big portion of that, and Andrew, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a big portion of that has to do with the growth in your property values, just like you said. Another portion of that is increased state aid. So the more aid you get from Madison or from the state, the less the local tax levy has to pay. And that is a function of a very complex formula that we won't get into a lot of detail of, but that's a really good question. Anything else on some of these charts before I get into a little bit more history? Did I cover most of it, Andrew? Okay. Okay, so this is a really important slide, and hopefully this will be on your website, because this slide lists your history. And so it's clear and it's black and white, and no one's going to, say that, oh, you just went to referendum for facilities. You didn't just go to referendum for facilities. You know that you just went to referendum to exceed the revenue limit, to get more dollars in to operate. Again, remember, that's separate from facilities. Last time you went for a facility referendum was '07, and it was a $2 million building project that passed. The time before that, 20 years ago. And that was a 12.9 million, crazy, it was a 12.9 million middle school. Can't build a middle school today for 12.9 million. So again, just your history, I'm not gonna go through each one. And then a lot of times we get asked, what are the neighbors doing? So this is black and white, clear. What have some of your neighbors done in terms of referendums? Grantsburg just failed 2 in April. St. Croix Central, as we were talking about earlier, failed as well. And then Baldwin, Osceola, Somerset, all passed. Most of those are facility referendums. So again, just information for your purposes about area referendums. Since 2010, 87% of Wisconsin school districts have gone to referendum for either debt or revenue limit. So you're not alone. You are not alone. I'm working with about 16 districts right now that are looking at April for facilities. This year, there's only one opportunity, or actually 2 opportunities this year to go to referendum. They were February and April. There's nothing this fall. There were 71 questions on the ballot. So again, I guess the takeaway here is you're not alone. There's a lot of districts out there that are asking to upgrade their facilities. This is just a little bit about election dates. So there's a primary and a general in the spring, and there's a primary and a general in the fall, only on even years. So this is an odd year. We're in 2021. We only have a spring primary and general. So those are the only times that a school can put anything on a ballot, is during a primary or a general. And there's a deadline for the school to the board to adopt a resolution 70 days in advance. So they really have to decide by the end of January if this would happen and what they want to put on the ballot in April. And that's what the survey will help us with. So that was a brief summary before we get into the survey, right?
Well, we're going to do questions first.
So what else?
If you have questions, will you please come up to the mic so we can hear you?
Anything else that comments or concerns about the impact? I must have done a good job explaining taxes because I don't see any questions, which is good. So I'm going to stay, and so if something comes up, feel free to ask a question, and I'd be happy to answer it. Yeah, so that was a good question, Andrew. He was asking the difference between recurring and non-recurring. So again, we're going back to that 1.9 million. The 1.9 million was a recurring, and all that means is an annual tax. It doesn't end, keeps going. And that's what you were successful in 2017, was a recurring. Some districts ask for non-recurring, which is asking for a tax, additional taxes for a finite period of years. They're more successful, but they're challenging because after the finite period of years, you got to go back to referendum to ask for more because you've been used to those dollars coming in. So yeah, that's a good question. Again, tonight it's more about facilities, but I think it's good to understand there's 2 kinds of questions that go on a ballot.
Questions, comments before I proceed? I don't want to miss anybody. Okay. The second portion of the presentation is the school perceptions survey. Again, this is in draft version. This is literally the 8th version of the survey. We meet tomorrow morning again with school perceptions. So likely be more changes, and then we'll approve the survey because we've got to get it to the printer in order to get it in the mailboxes for it to be a meaningful set of results before we have to make decisions in November, December, and January. So the 30th of September, the board votes to approve that, and then it goes to the printer. So the reason you don't have a hard copy physical version of it yet is because it isn't final. What you see here, again, will be subject to change based on a couple of things. First, the feedback you provide here, and second, board action on the 30th. So, walking through the highlights, I'm not going to read every word to you. I don't know that that would be necessary. So we have a district that has exceeded expectations on the school report card every single year that it has existed, and that goes all the way back to 2012. So we've done well academically. In addition to that, you just saw the presentation by Lisa. We've done well in regards to our responsibilities to you, the taxpayer, in regards to how we are using your dollars. So those two pieces of the puzzle lead us into the actual nuts and bolts of the survey. So underneath this, you will see the how to take the survey piece. You could take it electronically by following the instructions that you see there, or if you're a person that wants to do it hard copy, you could do that as well. A question was asked on Monday evening about if I'm open and enrolled into the district, can I complete a survey? The people that will receive it are those who are eligible to vote in an Amory school district referendum. And on the actual survey, it notes whether you are or are not in district, because school perceptions will desegregate that data. For instance, it would be easy for someone to say, yes, I would like a pool and I would like it to be $50 million because I don't have to vote and I don't have to pay in this district. That wouldn't be something, the result that wouldn't be as valuable. So it disseminates those results, segregates it out. Okay, the deadline is going to be November 8th if we get it to print into you on time. The date that we're looking at is about the 20th or 21st, and then we'll have about 2.5 weeks to get that done. The results are awful fast in turnaround, so we will get those results on November 9th most likely, and as soon as I have them, they'll be in the hands of the board. They'll be discussed at our board meeting, and then there's a community meeting, and you'll see that slide coming up right after the 15th of November when the board sees those results. I'm going to bring them here, and you can see them here too. So that's the timeline on survey. If you can move forward onto the second page, the graph at the chart at the right speaks to the academic achievements of the district. We've done well in the areas that are assessed, which are typically reading and math, K-12. We've done well there, and we've exceeded the expectations of the state in every single year and far beyond when we had a report card well back into the 80s, in the 90s. So we've done well academically. How are we doing financially? I don't want to be redundant, but I think it is very important to note that for 7 consecutive years, the mill rate in this district reduced. And in this 8th year, the present year we're in right now, it basically has remained steady. It hasn't gone up significantly. It hasn't gone down, but it hasn't gone up much. And then on the right, our comparison to our neighbors. The only difference in the graph here versus the graph that Lisa showed is New Richmond's out and Altoona's in, because that's our new conference, and we're lower than Altoona as well. We're the lowest of the 8, and we're lower than state average. So we're doing well academically, and we're doing well in regards to our responsibilities in the area of finance. So that's what this shows. School perceptions, it's tough to summarize all of the priority ones because the spreadsheet is lengthy at best. So what school perceptions helped us do is summarize the needs of the district into 3 big categories. Major building systems need to be updated or replaced, and the site needs improvement. They refer to deferred maintenance as major building systems. Deferred maintenance isn't always understood. You understand it because you've been here and you've heard that word, and you've heard me say it's that which needs to be fixed, but not everyone does. So trying to put the survey in layman's terms, so to speak. So that's the first item. Major building systems need to be updated or replaced. Second, many classrooms and labs are outdated. Next week, Wednesday, right here at this building, if you're interested in seeing things in real time, we're going to tour these buildings and you can see exactly what we're talking about. This building here was built in 1976 for $3.7 million. The price tag on fixing the walls of this building in regards to tuck point, through wall flashing is 4.2 million. So just the walls would be $500,000 more. So that's what happens over the course of 50 years. The third area, support areas are in need of improvement. And not just here, but in other areas. The elementary media center is incredibly small. The kitchen and cafeteria here are incredibly small. We have fitness equipment. If you walk out of the auditorium, you don't need to do anything further than to look down the hallway, which is right down this hallway, and you see a whole bunch of fitness equipment is sitting in the hallway. It doesn't fit in the weight room. So we're out of space. So that needs to be addressed, and a variety of other things as well. So basically what it boils down to is this ticket question. But before we get to this ticket question of yes, no, would you support, I want to talk to you about the paragraph that is listed there, because I'm speaking on your behalf, and I don't want to do that without hearing your feedback. It says, some people have asked if now is the right time to consider building a new high school. Given the cost of building new, which is estimated to be $80 million, in feedback gathered during community listening sessions, this being one of them, it was decided by the Board of Education that a new high school is not a viable option. That's what this says right now in draft version. Is that accurate? I'm asking. I would like to hear from all of you if it is. If you have questions about what does a new high school really cost, I don't want to date or age Lisa, Troy, or John, but between the three of them, they have nearly 100 years of experience in building new high schools. So they would be able to help us with that. So how do you feel about that statement? Because it's there. It's me speaking on behalf of you. So, Bob, could you come up to the mic so we can hear you? Well, we want to see you as well. Let me talk about enrollment in this district. My first year here as building principal in the high school, there were 614 kids here. The present year we're at 487 was the number that I most recently saw. We've been as low as the 440s, we've been as high as the 600s. We just graduated 122 seniors last year. We have 85 kids that came in elementary. Where does the 50 come from? That's in 4KK first and second. We have 50 kids that open enrolled from somewhere else to here, 50 more kids, because it was actually something like 60 to 15 or something like that. 15 went out and 65 came in, something like that. District-wide, we were up about 30 or 40. More came in than went out, but when you graduate 122 and you bring in 85, you're already 37 in the hole. Is this district going to go from a total enrollment of 1446 last year to the 1900 range? Nope. I don't think that's going to happen in the rest of my career. I don't think that's going to happen. If it does, that's great, but I think that would be unrealistic. And I say 1900 because my first year here, we were in the 1800s. It was the low 1800s. That was 16 years ago. So growth in regards to, census and demographic growth studies, I'm not knowledgeable enough to answer that. This talk of the bridge is going to bring people here, I'm not sure that's true in Amory. I think it might be true in Somerset, New Richmond, and Baldwin, but I'm not sure that it's true here, but I can't say that with certainty. So that is a very good point, Bob. What is the future of growth here? Excellent point. Other feedback on that item? Sure. Well, let's talk about that. If you're building a new high school at 80 million, You heard Lisa speak before, and the number that I have in my head, because I've looked at this many times, I think was 3.45 or 3.42, something like that, meaning that was $345 for every 100,000. If it's 200,000, if it's 300,000, the number gets bigger. That's $80 million just for the needs of building a high school. Now, you could certainly shortchange and build a high school for $50 million. That's what we did here already at $3.7 million. And we have the needs we have now 50 years later. Or you could build it right and spend 60, 70, 80. But that does not count the needs of the elementary, the intermediate, and the middle, which also have deferred maintenance needs running towards 8 to 10 million. So you're in actuality talking 80, 90 million. And then if you're talking things like childcare and pool, now you're talking 80, 90, 100 million. And if the highest mill rate impact that Lisa has ever seen in her 34 years is a 2.22, this is probably like a 4.22. That's getting to be a really big price tag. Those are just the facts. If the community, if you want that to be on the survey as should we build a new high school and put the price point on there, we could certainly entertain doing that. It is obviously the board's final call. My hunch is that would be a resounding no. If you put the price point on there, that you would have folks in abundance say, that's a really big price tag, that we shouldn't do that. Also remember about if you build a new school, this is a point made to be very clear by John and by Troy, look at where you're sitting. This is a wonderful facility. Look at the gymnasium. I mean, we have probably one of the nicest gymnasiums in this part of the state. We host all kinds of events. It's a fantastic facility. We just redid the floor. We just put in a family consumer ed room. All of that goes, unless you're building a high school around those areas, you can do that. But the price tag is still big. So again, is that an accurate statement? I don't want to speak on behalf of you. I see a head shaking. I'm certainly not going to ask all of you to speak, but I want to make sure you know that that's part of the conversation and that's on the survey, and the board's going to weigh in on that on the 30th. I saw a hand go up. Joanne, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a opportunity to build goodwill, I would maybe put the dollar sign in there, or an amount, and show that the board has made a prudent decision. Now, I think the board has taken some negative press, whether earned or not earned, but to say in there that the school board has decided this is not a viable option.
Well, that's what it says presently, and 80 might be aggressive and overly exorbitant in its cost, but it isn't 20. It's certainly 60, 70, or 80.
Right, but you know that, and the board knows that, but if this is going out to the public
That's what would be there.
the number you're talking about.
80 million would be there.
Okay.
We can. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have more information. I'm not sure that everyone will gather what it means and so forth, but that's certainly food for thought. Jessica?
Yeah, that was what Lisa started to say was my thought when I was thinking about the survey. When I fill that out, I maybe want to have an idea of how much that would cost. Because I have been in Amory for all my life, and I would love to have a swimming pool. But maybe I need to know what it would cost on my taxes, whether I'm going to vote yes or no for a particular question like that. Will we consider having dollar amounts by the questions on the survey?
Yes, they are, and you'll see that coming up, and that 80 million is there. We could go further and say the mill rate impact is, the tax impact is, and therefore we decided that's not the best use of dollars. I mean, prior to me being here, I was at my in-laws and we had some supper with my kids. They're golfing and I'm here, so I don't know who got the better end of the deal there. My father-in-law said to me, and he's a fairly conservative guy, and he said, I would love to have a pool in Amory. I said, anything more? And he says, I would love to have a pool in Amory. Who's paying for it? Not me, but I'd love to have one. You better put a price tag on the survey, he says, obviously. Other sentiment about the paragraph that I've noted. Okay. This is the ticket question. Would you, if you could head back to that area Becky, wherever you are. Would you support the school district of Amory pursuing a referendum to fund the issues identified above? So the way school perceptions note this is sort of the ticket question to ask other questions. So how many said yes, how many said no? So at that point, we get into further detail. So the recommended plan, again, I'm not going to read you a list of stuff, but the recommended plan is to address those high school projects. This is an all-inclusive list. Everything that was noted as a priority one is listed here. Everything noted as a priority one at the middle schools there, intermediate schools there, elementary schools there. Now you could bring that grand total of 33 million down to 23 million. You simply pick and choose what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. I mean, if you did all of the deferred maintenance priority one items, it's 33 million. If you do something in addition to that or something less than that, your number goes up or goes down from there. So it's 32.7 in actuality. 33 is simply the number for ease of math that was listed here. Okay, if you can move forward, please. Funding support. This is the information that you saw Lisa present. The impact, if we did just the deferred maintenance, and this is the way it's listed on the survey, of 33 million would be 1.41, meaning $141 for every 100,000, meaning your impact would move us from 7.86, which is the present year's mill rate, to 9.27, which brings us in approximately in the year of 2018-19, right around state average, because I believe state average is 9.22, and below every year prior to that. That's the cost of doing business. Yes, we are debt-free, but those districts that are debt-free are often districts that are in the position either to invest or not invest in the future. And that's the position we are at now. We have that opportunity to do that. How much of an investment do we want to make is the question, if any. So that's the impact on the recommended plan. And then there's the big question. Definitely yes, probably yes, undecided, probably no, and definitely no. School Perceptions has been doing this for quite a while. They have a way of how to flush out what the undecideds are in actual number. What they have said to me is typically 1/3 go up to the yes category, 1/3 go down, and 1/3 do one of two things. Either they don't vote, or they go up, or they go down. And it's your job to get that 1/3 that don't vote or will go down to go up if you want to make it happen. So they have a metric by which to figure that out. And then there's certainly folks in the probably no and the definitely no category. Sure. It says, would you support a $33 million referendum to fund the recommended plan as described on the previous page? And as some of you had indicated, what is the price point on that? This is what it will say. Representing an annual tax increase of $141 per year, $11.75 per month for every 100,000, assuming interest rates between 3.25 and 3.5, and hopefully they would be less than that, but there's no predicting the future. So that's what the question will say. So it's not just a question of yes or no, it's a question of yes or no at this price point. It's meaningful for folks to know what is it going to do in regards to my taxation. If you could move forward from there. So the additional projects, and for those who watched or attended the board meeting, you heard me say this, so I don't want to be redundant, but I'm going to say it again. The priority one of the district is to address our building systems, our deferred maintenance. That's priority one here. For me, it's as if my home is falling apart, but I'm going to put on a deck. No, if your home is falling apart, you don't put on a deck, you fix your home. And we've got a home here at the high school, and someone at the elementary, and even a little bit at the middle, and the intermediate school too, where we got some things that need to be fixed. $33 million of things that need to be fixed. So the first item is an early childhood center. And the question reads, would you support expanding a referendum to build an early child care center? The cost that is listed there is $7 million. Whatever that is, it could be $3 million, it could be $10 million, depends on what you want it to be. If it's a separate building, if it's an attachment to the elementary, it depends on what you want it to be. So would you support expanding a referendum to build an early childhood center? The cost would be $30 a year, $2.50 per month. We probably should add the mill rate impact in there as well to be similar to the last question. And then there's the same answers of probably yes, or definitely yes, all the way through definitely no. And then the next question is the swimming pool question would be added to the campus, and that would be anywhere from 10 million to 20 million. The number we talked about at the board meeting the other night was 12 and a half. Troy had provided that number through his resources. It's listed here at 15. Baldwin just put one in, theirs is 12. So it depends on what that would be. We'd have to pick a number in order to be able to get an answer. So right now the number is 12 or 12 and a half is what we talked about at the board. So that's what we would put on the survey. And the impact would be 64 a year and 533 per month for every 100,000. Yes. So anywhere from definitely yes to definitely no on that question. Now remember, the cost of putting in a pool is that. That's the cost of putting it in. Please note, in addition, the construction costs, the district would need to spend $250,000 a year to heat, clean, maintain, supervise the pool. If you're going to do that, we have to come to you again to pass an operational referendum to pay for that, because that's not a one-time, 1 year, $250,000 cost. That's every year for the rest of time. And the district does not have $250,000 laying around just for a pool. So that means your price point is bigger even than what is listed here. And then lastly, the last page, I believe this is the last page, is the information, the demographic information. And then lastly, a little section on how you would like us to communicate with you. And then lastly, a satisfaction question about the district. So again, you have an opportunity to chime in with your questions, comments, concerns. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, because the comments go to you guys. I don't know if you're aware that during the summer, I had been asked to do some research, just digging things out from the past attempts to put in a pool. And I talked with Dr. Doerfler. I've had several interviews with multiple people, the city, with some leaders that had tried to do the pool in the past, with the healthcare system, and have come up with an idea that I presented to each of those people. What has happened in the past is a pool facility has been voted down, number one, because it's usually been tried to be tied to a school referendum and making it that much more. So a pool becomes the strike item, the line item that says let's lower the referendum. So anyway, the idea that came up was, could we create a collaborative that if we create a third-party entity, let's just say it's the Amory Wellness and Learning Center, and the school district, the city of Amory, and the Amory Hospital and Clinic collaborate together to make that happen. We've looked into grant funding. The city has available quite a bit of money. That's what I used to do. I was a grant writer and raised money. The school would have some interest in partnering there. The hospital is running out of space for their rehab center and their fitness center. They are very interested in looking at a collaboration for the fitness center at the high school, where they're running out of space, versus having it just alone on the referendum for the school work that needs to be done, and have it become the strike item. Another thing that we talked about is we could include a child care center. If we could put it near the school so it would all be close, it would basically be a true community collaboration that has a pool, a fitness center, a community child care center. I talked with Dr. Doerfler about, is there a way that we could find to put that kind of question, if we get a lot of no's on, would you approve a $15 million pool? Is there a way we could put, would you consider looking at a collaborative? Based on what I've talked to the city and the county, building it is not going to be the issue. It's the sustaining and maintenance ongoing. Well, the hospital is showing interest in maintaining and working with the pool and the fitness center. Just verbally, we would look at maybe help from the school on the child care center because they've done it. They know the laws, they know those rules. The city looking at potentially, building maintenance, grounds maintenance, something like that. So I'm asking, what are the thoughts? Interesting, not interesting? Do we continue? I mean, we're at the step where we're ready to form a core group of bringing the leadership of each of those entities, plus an attorney, plus possibly, an architect, and some funding sources together. And, just looking at, we've got a small group, but comments or thoughts on that as well.
I think I heard you talk about this at the last meeting as well. So I've been doing some thinking about that and wondering what the level of commitment has been, if you've gotten any kind of level of commitment for land where it would be built, a commitment of finances from the hospital or the other outside entities that you're looking at the city financially, and then the level of commitment for how it's going to be run. And it seems like a lot. And if we're looking at trying to get that onto a referendum question survey and then try to get that going as early as April onto something like that, it seems like a lot of logistics left to do in that kind of timely manner. Is that possible that you can nail down some commitments like that before we do that or not?
I'm not sure. Like I said, we're at the point of forming the team. We've gathered all the past history. We've looked at what have been the roadblocks, and we're trying to find a way to overcome. The next step is to find out, are people saying, yeah, that might be a good idea? And I'm not saying there wouldn't potentially be a mill rate that would come through the city for the ongoing, but based on what Patty Bjorklund and Paul Isaacson and the county has said, building the facility is not going to be the issue.
And was there a particular site that was going to be done on?
There have been site surveys in the past. I briefly hinted to Dr. Doerfler if maybe potentially if the school's part of the partnership, maybe some school land might be appropriate. Part of that being, if we're going to have a daycare center that goes along with the elementary school, it would be good to have that close. The other thing is if we collaborate and have a shared fitness center and a pool that the students use, it would also be very beneficial to have that close to the school, besides open to the community. That was a hint. I got no commitment, nothing like that. It was just a hint, and he just kind of went,
I think we're just looking at a really short turnaround time for the survey to go out. And if we're looking at specifics on the survey of what that financial impact would be to your taxes on every other question, but it's very open-ended for a pool with a collaboration, or how would you envision that question being put forth on the survey if it was just an interest item?
that I don't know. That's what we talked about.
Well,
that go to the people who know how to write the questions.
Well, the survey goes to print on the 30th, so there's but 8 days for that. So that's not realistic in my mind. Let me say again the same thing I said last time. The 4 questions I have about the pool remain the same. Where, how much, who manages it, and lastly, does the community want it? So the district wouldn't be interested in being a part of any group until November 9th, when we know whether it's a real thing the community wants or it's something the community has no interest in. That's at the point it becomes really real for us. If 70% of people say, we gotta have this, that's a conversation we need to start to engage in. I think we got a couple of questions. I saw Bob's hand and Ryan's hand.
Do you have any insight into how the center in Richmond is funded, purchase, who owns it, how's it?
Yes, I've talked with those. I've also been talking with Brian Burns. asking if there is a way to set up this separate entity. We've contacted 2 different places. The center in Richmond was a collaborative through the city, some funding that was given through their foundation. They brought in the YMCA to manage. They have since asked the YMCA to leave. That happened several years ago due to some policies and practices that the YMCA had adopted. And they currently are running on their own. They do have partnerships with the school and with the healthcare system and with the city.
Two things. First of all, I just don't think that you can do anything that's going to slow this referendum process down. Anything whatsoever. Whether it's the survey, changing the wording of the survey, or whatever. You've got to be moving forward. Time is of the essence. In my opinion, it's great to have those interest rate projections. And then you have the Federal Reserve today saying that they're seeing 6 to 9 interest rate increases in the next 2 years. These interest rates are going up, and we need to take advantage of the low interest rates.
Our timeline is, I wouldn't call it tight, but our timeline is clear. We have a obligation by law to make a decision by our January board meeting. It's on the docket for the December board meeting. If there's hesitation, we'll wait till January. So our results will be out, our surveys will be out in the mail October 2021. They're in November 8th. We have results November 9th. We talk about those results at the board on November 15th. We talk about those results with all of you who want to come here and see them on November 18th. And at that point, we either proceed forward with said plan that's been recommended, or we include a child care or a pool, or neither. And at that point, we make a decision whether to go or not go in December. And at that point, it would be on the ballot in April. What that looks like today, I couldn't tell you. But again, I'd like to see what the community has to say. You're one slice of it, and we appreciate your voices, but I'd like to see what the community has to say about these things. And we'll have hopefully a real strong number in favor of that which needs to get fixed around here, because that's a non-negotiable for the district. That's why we're talking to begin with. That's where this started. It has to get addressed. And if you want to see it for yourself, and I would encourage you to come next Wednesday. There are problems in this building particularly. Other sentiments about survey and any aspect of it, not just what I was making reference to there. Other comments, questions, thoughts? Stephanie, go ahead. So the question for the audience that would see this on tape is about ESSER grants. ESSER is federal stimulus dollars via COVID-related reasons to public schools in America, not just in Amory, but across the country. There are 3 rounds of ESSER. The first round of ESSER was for $134,000. We applied for and received that, and we used that to keep our child care afloat, because when we closed school in March 2020, we closed our child care and we sent all of our employees packing without a dime in their pockets. So we used that amount of money to keep that operation afloat. The second round was $546,000 from the federal government. We applied for and used that money for an HVAC system that actually was a price tag of $836,000, so it didn't even cover it. And please know the urgency of that system at the elementary. If we hadn't fixed it, we would have no air conditioning and no heat. It is original to the building, 1967. It is now 2021, and the ventilation at the elementary has probably never been better. The third round of ESSER, that process has just now begun. We don't know specifically how much we're going to get, because that is contingent on how much in-person instruction you had. And in this part of the state, we're all probably above 80, 90%. In Milwaukee, Madison, probably not as much. That is said to be approximately between 1 and 1.2 million, and that has specific strings attached to it for the school district of Amory. It's 1 to 1.2. That has specific strings attached to it. 20% of that needs to be devoted specifically towards learning loss, because we have seen learning loss in this district and elsewhere. You can't take 5 months of in-person instruction away from kids and expect there to not be learning loss. There was. So we have to target that. And then there's all sorts of other strings for the other 80%. The list is long, which you have to be clear what you're using it for. That application has not been completed yet because it hasn't been asked to be completed yet. Can that be used in any way to address some of these needs? Well, it was for HVAC, but it isn't going to cover 33 million, that is for certain. Go ahead.
Are the use of any of those grants existing? Or like how are they able to pay for, like say we give this referendum and all of your maintenance needs are met. I know there's reoccurring maintenance needs, but is there ever a point where we might have extra money and what does that look like? What do we do with that?
You likely won't have extra because when you take that money, it'll have to be specifically obligated and spent by the end of the calendar year 2023. So you can't just put it in the coffers and wait for the rainy day. And they want it to be tied to specific COVID-related items. The reason we were able to do the HVAC at the elementary is because ventilation was directly related to improving the conditions that COVID created. The elementary school had a system that was failing. It literally had failed. It was operating at barely 20% capacity probably. In addition, the tunnels that are underneath the elementary, and if you didn't know, believe me, it's quite an experience to see. There are tunnels underneath there, and that was also 1967. So you were running brand new ventilation system and air over 1967 territory. So we fixed that as well. We had to take care of those needs, and it qualified as an expense that you could make. We don't know specifically how we're going to spend ESSER 3 because we don't know specifically how they want us to use it quite yet. But we do know it's tied to minutes of instruction, and it's tied to learning loss at least in 20% of the dollars. Go ahead, Stephanie. No, go ahead. That's why we're here.
Another question.
Yes.
About revenue. Have you guys thought about bringing on a virtual program? I know there's, I think it's Rural Virtual Academy out of Melbourne, Wisconsin that they would offer. I know that for some students, learning best in the classroom, but is bringing on a virtual program to bring up our enrollments. Is that something that you guys are even considering or have thought of?
Well, right now we're simply trying to get through another school year, still struggling with COVID, to create and have launch another program such as a virtual program would be an undertaking that we would need to spend a lot of time and energy on to do it right, because that's the point for us in this district. We're not just going to do it to get people to come here. We want to do it right. We have neighbors that are doing virtual education that are not doing it right and are performing very poorly. One of our neighbors in CISA 11 has a virtual outfit that is the categories on the school report card. The lowest category is meets few expectations. They have been rated as meeting few expectations every year since 2012. That's not of interest to us. Yes, there are kids that do better virtually and need that. We're simply not in a position right now to be able to create that because that's a whole nother undertaking. But I totally understand your point, Stephanie, because it would help with enrollment and it would help some kids. That is absolutely true.
Have you looked into the Rural Virtual Academy?
I have not.
Okay, so it would be something, and I know this is completely kind of off topic, so I don't mean to like derail it.
That's okay. Go ahead.
It would be a program that we would be able to adopt here, that it wouldn't be something that you guys would have to create. You would actually have to apply for that program to be offered here, but it would just allow students that are dealing with different things or the need to ever have to go virtual, they could still go virtual and keep that district funding here instead of allowing it to go to someplace like Grantsburg or I think St. Croix Central has a virtual program as well. But I don't, it's an application process.
I would be happy to talk to you about that, investigate that more. We're always looking for options that will improve our programmatic offerings that we have here, and that would be another addition, certainly. Other comments or questions, survey or otherwise, that you may have? Go ahead, Fritz.
When the survey goes out, is it going to be just that only one person in the family can vote, or
No.
so my wife can vote? And I can
Yes.
vote separately?
Yes, you simply need to request another. If you go back to the first page, you'll see that you'll get a, where is it listed there? The survey code can only be used once. To obtain additional surveys, you simply need to contact Becky, and then she'll give you another survey with another code. So both, you could weigh in. The more people we get, I'm not a statistician and a survey expert, but the higher the number of respondents, I think the more valid your results become. So the more the better. Other comments or questions? Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. You're taking a night off of, probably away from one of the nicest nights of the fall, potentially, because it's very nice out. Again, I got the short end of the stick by coming here and being with you rather than golfing, but that's okay. I'll be around. Lisa will stay for a few minutes, I imagine, and Troy and John and Andy as well. If you have questions, feel free. Have a nice evening. Thank you. Oh, adjourn. Yes, sorry.